Viewer poll, should I start this off with a sucking or blowing joke?
Bum.
Kirby Triple Deluxe. See, this is why I like these kinds of ranting reviews, is because it allows me to do some non-conventional things. For this particular one, in a sense, I want to open up a discussion topic with everybody, because it relates very heavily to whether or not you're actually going to like this game. And that is, when is it okay for Nintendo to sort of do a copycat game? Like, when is it okay for them to stick to their laurels, and when is it okay for them to do innovation? When should they strive for more instead of just staying where they are? Well, let's talk about it. Two prime examples I want to use for this are both Mario games, okay? One being Super Mario 3D World, which came out not too long ago, and also New Super Mario Bros. Wii U, which also came out not too long ago. However, one got very, very good reception, almost universally praised across the board for being unique, original, and downright everything people wanted, while the other was accused of just being absolutely nothing. It was just the same old thing and everybody bitched about it. Why? Why do we have those kinds of reactions to things? Well, I may not have all the answers, but I think I've got to start here. I think what a lot of people who use this argument don't realize is the concept of genres. That is, Mario is not the only 2D platformer out there, alright? Metroid is not the only exploration-centric series where progression is based on finding power-ups, 2D or 3D for that matter. F-Zero is not the only futuristic racer out there. What sets them apart from themselves and their contemporaries is what they do within their respective genre to set themselves apart, to make themselves feel unique, and to innovate on their formulas. Now, it's very easy to perceive that a franchise may not be doing this, simply because they've made their name making certain innovations over others, and they kind of have to bring those innovations into future titles, otherwise it doesn't really feel justified having that same name attached to it. In that sense, developers are kind of locked by their own creativity. But because of this, it's very easy to look over some of the really cool things they do on the side to complement and enhance those previous innovations to make them even better, even cooler, and yes, even justify paying more money to experience them again. Does Kirby Triple Deluxe do this? Well, yes, I would argue, but to explain why, we first have to justify what's important. What are these innovations, and how do you enhance them? Let's talk about it. Obviously, there's Hypernova Kirby. What this basically is you find these things called miracle fruits scattered throughout the stages. And basically what they do is they turn Kirby's stomach into the literal black hole that everybody jokes about it being in the first place. He can suck up trees, bombs, giant lizards, hazards that are so incredibly large there's no way you can interact with them before. It creates some really interesting segments and some really cool puzzles using just an extension of Kirby's natural talents. And yes, while you don't get to use it at any given time, it does lead to some really cool set pieces and some really interesting pieces of gameplay where you're using this, like I said, an upgraded version of your normal powers, sort of a supercharged version of them, if you will. So that's kind of an enhancement in the literal sense. An enhancement in kind of a not-so-literal sense is new powers. I know this seems really thin. This is a really paper-thin excuse for making a new game, but interestingly enough, the 4 new powers they introduced here, I think, off the top of my head, they are Archer, Beetle, Bell, and Circus. You know, with the exception of Circus, I liked using every single one of these powers. They felt good. They're the sort of fighter level of you can just keep running and just press the B button and you'll do something awesome without even breaking speed. Archer in particular is incredibly useful against bosses. If you learn the timing on when to charge your arrow and let it go, and then immediately press the button again, you will waste through their health bars. I've beaten Coily Rattler without... God, what is the thing even called anymore? I can't speak tonight. Without even taking a hit, God. Okay, moving on. Another power that feels really good to use is Beetle. This is a very heavy power, if you will. It's mostly focused around grabbing enemies and throwing them at one another, basically using them as living projectiles. And not unlike how Kirby normally just kind of swallows one enemy and then spits them back out, but I digress. There's a whole bunch of different throws and sort of combos you can do. Your dashing attack, once again, doesn't really slow you down and it still kills enemies. Your hovering ability is gone though, which I was never a fan of powers that did that unless it was like Cupid or something, where it just basically made the infinite flight easier. This is more sort of a constant, just flying straight upwards. And because you can't exactly make it go faster by mashing the button, not really a fan of that. But other than that, power is really fun to use. The impact, I think, is what makes it fun. The third power, Bell. This is one everybody liked to joke about in the trailers leading up to the game because you just constantly hit them and the tone keeps going up. It's like Kirby just has no mercy for everything in front of them. It's just beating the crap out of them. But interestingly enough, it didn't really end up being one of my favorite powers. Maybe it's the goofy hat, maybe it's just the concept of him using instruments as a weapon, but it didn't really click with me. All in all though, it is very, very useful. Once again, your dash attack doesn't slow you down. He just kind of throws these bells out, and it's enough to kill most normal enemies in one shot, break through blocks, and you even keep sliding along. So it's definitely going to have its fans, but honestly, I'd rather choose Archer first, simply due to the sheer damage. And speaking of damage, that's another point I want to bring up, is that this game does a really good job of making you feel powerful. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Even when you have no ability, I want you to check just how much damage these stars actually do to bosses when you spit these projectiles back at them. The damage is insane. You take so much of their health away with every single one of these shots. Even the hammer flip. You know, that move where Kirby takes the hammer power, holds it up behind him, it goes on fire, and then he slams it into the enemy. Even that doesn't do as much damage as this does sometimes. It's crazy. So even when you have no copy ability in your possession, you still feel powerful and you still feel awesome. It's a really good feeling that no matter what, you're never truly defenseless. You could argue, I guess, that it makes the powers feel a little less special in that sense, but I think it just makes the overall experience a little more awesome. Once again, enhancing that base mechanic. Another bullet point I want to touch on in terms of production is the music, and my god, did Nintendo nail it with this one. Now, I might be a little bit biased towards this because Dreamland 2 and Kirby 64 are some of my favorite games of all time, and they are represented here musically a lot. And I do mean a lot, but it's the quality of these remasterings that really stood out to me. The instrumentation, the way they captured the feeling and the intent of the original songs, but making them even higher quality, bringing them to a level that I think the original team would have done if they had access to these kinds of resources. See, I guess the best way to put it is Nintendo is a really big company, yeah? They've got a lot of money, they've got a lot of manpower, they've got a lot of resources to make something feel really big and really special. And it really does feel like they took advantage of it here, at least in terms of the music. Especially the final boss theme in this game. Not going to tell any spoilers, not going to explain the context in which you hear it at all. But that song, holy crap, just that song, worth the entire trip. You know, speaking of the trip, I want to talk about the collectibles in this game, and specifically the sunstones and the keychains. Well, I guess those are the only collectibles in this game other than the normal items, so I guess that goes without saying anyway. Anywho, yes, sunstones. There are 100 of them in the game. You need a specific number of them from the stages within that world in order to unlock the door to the boss, and all things considered, it's not a whole lot, okay? You're already 2/3 of the way there if you grab both of them in World 1-1, okay? But grabbing all 100 of them, once again, I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say it's more about the journey than it is the destination. Grabbing all 100 doesn't really give you a whole lot, but grabbing all of them in any particular world unlocks an extra stage at the end of that world, an EX level that has harder challenges, different setups, and another sunstone for you to collect, always culminating in another boss fight, or maybe 2 in the case of the last world, but once again, that's kind of spoiler-y, so I'm going to stay away from that. The thing is, it's more about what you see getting there, because there's really nothing to gain from getting 100% in terms of that. And I tend to notice that as a consistent theme. Yes, it is cool seeing all of this sort of retro artwork on the keychains, like all of these old sprites, all of these old characters, especially if you grew up with those games, and I did for the most part. But it comes back to the idea that they don't really do anything. Like, collecting these keychains doesn't give you new abilities. It's not like the stickers in Brawl where you can attach them to the bottom of your character's trophy and it gives them more power or anything. No, they're just kind of there to look pretty. And I don't know, I'm becoming more and more a fan of the idea that if you're gonna make me go out of my way... Okay, I guess I should explain where I'm coming from in terms of this. I am steadily becoming less and less of a fan of out-of-the-way collectibles and platformers like the Sunstones, or I actually have a scrapped rant review of Donkey Kong Country Returns where I talked about this in detail, where in a lot of situations you only have one shot at these things. They create a lot of situations where if you miss it, it's just gone and you can't go back for it, even if you have the skill to actually do it. And there are a lot of situations where you just don't have the reaction time necessary to be able to grab it the first time. So what are your options at that point? You either have to jump off a cliff or restart the whole level, basically forcing you to go through the exact same thing you just did all over again, even though you were skilled enough to beat the entire level in the first place. It's almost like if you had just lost a life. It would be less painful if you just realized it was your own lack of skill that made you have to start over, not the fact that something was kind of dickishly placed. And there's that nagging feeling in the back of your head that if you don't grab it, you're gonna miss out on something. And in a lot of cases, you are. Yeah, especially when it leads to absolutely nothing like it does in this game, it rubs me really the wrong way. And especially if it does absolutely nothing but unlock stages. I kind of feel like it would be more impactful if it did something for you, like the stickers in Brawl. It made you more powerful, like the collectibles in Metroid. Like, it was worth going out of your way to find that energy tank, or maybe going through that whole cycle all over again to get that energy tank, because now it meant in a future challenge, you'd have a little more extra life and a little more leeway to make mistakes, to actually apply your skill and learn how to beat this challenge or overcome this boss. Or maybe I have those backwards, but whatever. So yeah, long story short, they kind of feel out of place for me. I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. What was not a missed opportunity, though, is the extras in this game. Things like Day-to-Day's Drum Dash, or the True Arena, or Kirby the Fighters. That's an interesting one, because Kirby already has sort of like a fighting game list, a move list for every single power already. Why not just flat out let people battle each other? And it's actually pretty fun, okay? I have one other DS in my household, so I was actually to play against a couple other people using download play, and it's a blast! There's these mind games you can play with other people, especially with the way Kirby kind of floatily controls, for lack of a better word. There are just certain things you can do with certain powers that make them feel sorry, I had a little bit gaseous buildup there. That just make them feel awesome. Although, pro tip, stick with melee powers, okay? You're gonna get your ass kicked as if you're an archer in Kirby the Fighters, okay? Especially if your opponent's using Parasol. Just fuck Parasol. Fuck very hard mode and fuck Parasol. And I guess this is the point in the discussion where I try to bring everything full circle and bring it back around to that first discussion we had. Do I feel like Nintendo is kind of treading ground here? Well, no, actually. I feel like I've seen enough new things in this game, and I feel like I was given enough in terms of new sights, new things to do, new ways to look at old concepts, that I'm justified in paying more money for this, and justified in recommending it to all of you, because it really does feel like an experience that couldn't have happened before. It's something they couldn't have done on any other platform. And it really feels special in that sense. It's a really well-realized concept, and an extension of concepts that came before. And I think it's totally worth it because of that. Come to your own conclusions, but for me, yeah, definitely worth the money.